I think that it's safe to say that my pillars of content on this channel are as follows: horror games, Souls-likes, game design, and roguelikes. This video, all about them roguelikes, baby. I talked extensively about it with my video talking about the brilliance of Balatro, and since that time, the roguelike genre has seen an explosion of popularity, with Balatro going as far as being nominated for Game of the Year in 2024. And since that initial video that I made talking about Balatro, I've really taken a liking to the demo section of Steam to get a glimpse at a lot of upcoming entries in the genre, because a demo for a roguelike can actually go so much further than a demo for a normal kind of game. The inherent nature of a roguelike being an assortment of runs means that the demo, at least ideally, should provide an ample amount of randomness and allow for a healthy amount of time spent with the game before you even get your hands on the full product. I can even see the argument being made for demos almost being too good of a deal for roguelikes, since the amount of time that I've spent with some of these demos that I'm going to talk about today are easily in the double digits. Now, of course, these demos omit things. They block a lot of content and potential upgrades and abilities out of the game, so you don't get the game for free. But a good demo for a roguelike gets its claws into you with its still impressive amount of variation and immediate gameplay loops. And I want to tell you about a couple that you really got to keep an eye on. Slay the Spire's a good game, isn't it? Well, a lot of indie devs seem to think so too, and that's why there's so many fucking variants of that game design seen in the explosion of roguelites that really started not too long after that game's release. For The Lich is another in that long list of games inspired by that all-time classic, but just like another game that I talked about early in the year, Estrella the Six-Sided Oracle, For The Lich unsurprisingly adds dice to the table. But thankfully, it's more than just slay the spire with dice, as it uses a rather brilliant system of pushing your luck a la blackjack of all things to keep each decision tense and immensely rewarding. The demo gives you one character to play with and one to unlock, but for simplicity, I'll keep my discussion delegated to just the first character. The game functions on a system of up to 3 item slots that you can put weapons or defensive items in that all have their own stats. Some items are even offensive and defensive. Every turn, you will choose at least one of these items to use and roll dice from your hand of dice in an attempt to use it. Each of these items have a number associated with them, which is both the max amount of damage or shield that can be applied to it, and going over that number negates the item being used entirely, forcing the dice that you just rolled and tried to accumulate towards it to be put into your discard pile. But the gripping risk-reward system is that hitting the exact max number is also used for triggering that item's critical ability. And some of these abilities are better than others, obviously, but they range from adding an additional number on top of its maxed out critical, increasing its usefulness. There are some that allow you to add an extra dice entirely, and more that I won't go into for the sake of brevity, but on top of that, the real meat of the game is the dice itself. While you have your box standard dice that range from D4 all the way up to D20, you have variations of them, such as ones that allow you to roll them after you've rolled your critical, ones that create a bone after being rolled, which can be used to take away 1 from your maximum number that you've rolled already, which will save you from having rolled over your item's critical. But on top of all of this, you will also acquire trinkets that will also spice up the game. Mechanically, they do kind of work the same as dice, as they end up in your hand and you can use them either in tandem with an equipped item, but they will perform far more powerful abilities, such as re-rolling any item you've rolled already, automatically triggering an equipped item's critical ability, and always rolling the exact number that you need in order to hit your crit. For The Lich promises loads of number crunching, tough but meaningful choices and decision making, and the perfect balance of luck with that element of blackjack thrown into the mix. For The Lich is gonna be a great one. Also, its art style is pretty cool, I guess. So, I have a little bit of a confession. Vampire Survivors is kinda mid. Whoa, okay. Now before y'all beat me to death with hammers, let me at least explain that I think that as a framework, it's pretty great. I think ideally it's the perfect shut your brain off kind of game. The ultimate podcast game. But one, my brain considers Souls-likes to be the perfect podcast game, and two, the simplistic nature of just moving is so basic and bare bones that I can't help but focus on how boring just walking around is. I do have more issues with Vampire Survivors, but I'll just leave my critique as it's a fine starting point, and thankfully, Monsters Are Coming seems like a good evolution of that baseline. The game is a mashup of Vampire Survivors, but also a tower defense game, which is very odd, I know, but once you play through like 2 minutes, you'll understand what they're going for, and in my opinion, it works excellently. In Monsters Are Coming, you're tasked with bringing an entire village from one end of a cave to the other, all while protecting it from the monsters that are on their way. Just like Vampire Survivors, you get little gems from enemies that you kill that act as XP that will allow you to level up, but in this case, your level ups come in the form of expansions to your village. You'll acquire expansions that shoot bombs, freeze enemies, a literal ballista, and much more. Each time you acquire one of these, you'll have to choose where in your village it will go, allowing for strategy, and is an excellent example of meaningful decision making, which is one of my favorite things in roguelikes. Now, there are other ways to upgrade the village, and you get these as part of your level ups as well, but the core of those upgrades are from 3 key resources. Wood, which increases the rate of fire among weapons on your village, stone increases its defenses and heals damage, and gold allows you to expand outside of basic level ups. Now, the way that you get these extra resources is through the wonderful joy that is risk-reward. You'll have to either find a moment of peace or allow your village to be vulnerable as you go off the beaten path and farm these resources from trees, rocks, and gold deposits. Doing this allows your village to be wide open for potential swarming, and if you're not careful, your mobile little village can get stuck on any of these resources if they're in your path, causing you to potentially abandon your planned strategy in order to help your village continue moving along. There's a certain level of tension throughout every run of Monsters Are Coming that keeps my attention while simultaneously allowing my brain to zone out in the way that I think a lot of people are able to do with Vampire Survivors. It's currently my ideal version of this kind of game, as with all of my favorite roguelikes, it's filled with both meaningful decisions and simple, elegant fun. While Dominova isn't quite a Balatro-like, I do think it asks the question, what if dominoes, but roguelike? Likely in the same manner that I feel that Local Thunk asked themselves with poker. In Dominova, you're literally trying to stop the universe from being blown up by an entourage of animal-headed aliens. How? With dominoes. What the fuck? The game is called Dominova. In Dominova, you're essentially staring at a grid with a massive fog of war that you will eventually disperse with placing dominoes starting from an initial point at the bottom of the map. From there, you will have to place dominoes in the traditional manner where numbers have to match, but you also have to connect specific shapes that dominoes have, such as diamonds, triangles, clovers, and more. Eventually, you'll chain together huge combos with strings of dominoes that branch out from that initial position, and if you hit enough of a chain, you'll increase your multiplier. In each level, you're attempting to hit a series of 3 separate point goals, not too dissimilar to the idea behind Balatro. Now, this is all well and good and relatively straightforward, but thankfully there's a nice twist on this concept in the fact that there are hazards that you might have to stumble upon or see from a distance and need to avoid. Your dominoes can be destroyed by these hazards, frozen by them, burnt by them, reduced by them, and more. But in this case, you'll have different colored tiles that also give their own buffs, bonuses, and benefits, as well as offensive tiles such as bombs or axes that can help eliminate negative tiles entirely. On top of trying to link up your chain in the most effective way possible, these hazards really make the game the puzzle that it needs to be. But the real give and take with this system is gaining 3 attempts, represented by 3 hearts, to meet the required score, leading to a loss if you fail to meet this criteria. But in the hierarchy of points that you need to hit, if you do manage to hit any of these thresholds, all of your hearts reset, allowing you to have your 3 attempts all over again. Now, on paper, it might sound like this mechanic makes the game too easy, but I think that the game still manages to hold a great level of decision-making and tension. Even up to now, for example, I've still not been able to beat a run of this game. Dominova clearly takes some cues from Balatro, but does plenty unique ideas and concepts with it to keep it feeling like its own thing. And I really do think that if you want a nice change of pace from roguelikes that are clearly taking inspiration from Balatro, Dominova is a genuinely good place to start. Now this is literally Balatro but with dice. You have several rounds that are beaten by hitting a certain point threshold. You have a boss at the end of an act that not only acts as a significantly higher point threshold than the normal encounters, but that boss has a game-breaking ability that you have to overcome in order to beat it. You acquire new dice and abilities at shops between rounds. You may affect dice with specific abilities. You can earn rings on your hand that drastically change the way your runs are constructed, allowing you to craft certain builds. You buy special cards that give you powerful one-time abilities during gameplay. Does all this sound familiar? Of course it does. You've played Balatro. You've played the ever-loving fuck out of Balatro. You played Balatro more than I did. Now, I feel kind of bad just saying all that, because there's so much about Dice A Million that deserves your attention and recognition as an incredibly fun game that does take an established concept and tweak it into an entirely new system of dice and have it still work as well as it does. Dice A Million also does an incredibly impressive job with its abilities that you can stack. Its dice are incredibly varied, and it even carries over the humor of Balatro pretty well with some of its dice. The peanut, for example, is this game's banana, very rarely cracking open to give you a dice literally from the underworld that is so broken that I think it probably should get patched at some point, but who knows? However, I do think that the biggest difference between these two games, Balatro and Dice A Million, is the feeling of your turns. Whereas with Balatro, you select your cards, play them out, and watch the potential loops of effects racking up your score, it kind of feels like a slot machine every single turn. Dice A Million does end up feeling very much like a literal roll of the dice. You select your dice, click a button, and off you go. You have a few moments where your rings will kind of do what they do, but you'll never get that slow, drawn-out feeling of suspense that you do with Balatro. Dice A Million feels so much more immediate, and I think that despite some nuanced snobbery that might come with the act of the slow burn, the immediacy of Dice A Million might be just enough to make this game your new addiction. Balatro, but with dice. I can't think of a better elevator pitch than that. When I turned 18, my dad took me to a relatively local casino that I was legally allowed to go to, and I played video blackjack. I lost $20 and I said, I will never gamble again in my entire life. And here I am at 34, and while I haven't fully committed to that promise to myself, having done an occasional slot machine here and there in my time since, to say that I don't gamble would be a true statement. Which is why I think that virtual, non-committal gambling in video games such as Clover Pit is an ideal way to gamble, since there are stakes on the line, my life, and I don't have to worry about actually losing what's on the line, my life. Clover Pit is another game that's clearly inspired by Balatro, but it adds this wonderful twist of feeling kind of like Inscription, where the game expands beyond the core loop of gambling at a slot machine. In Clover Pit, you're stuck in a room from your love of gambling. Whether it's of your own volition or perhaps something more malicious remains to be seen in the full game, but at the core, you're sitting at a slot machine trying to rack up enough money to pay off your ever-increasing debt to an unknown entity. Off the bat, Clover Pit is one of the more difficult games on this list, at least for me, because it took me roughly 10 or 15 attempts before I was able to actually get a grasp on how you really do need to finagle the system in order to get a win out of it. In Clover Pit, there are two currencies. You earn coins from the slot machine, but before you can play, you have to choose whether or not to spend more or less coins to earn more or less coupons that are used to buy charms that, for the ease of explanation, act like jokers in Balatro. You can make certain icons appear more or less often, you can have some icons give a bonus when scored, stuff like that. Luckily, the game does provide a lot of real fun effects that you can craft a build out of. The catch is, the more money you spend, the more spins you get, but the less tickets you earn. Your goal in the end is just to gather up enough money to pay off your debt each round, and after each round, that debt will increase, and you get a call from a mysterious stranger that acts as permanent buffs as well as unavoidable debuffs that will affect you for the rest of your run. If, for whatever reason, you're unable to meet your debt quota by the allotted time, you fucking die. What makes this game fun is quite literally the non-stakes nature of it. It's the thrill of gambling, but put into a game where you have no real consequence whether or not you're doing poorly. Unlike Balatro that might at best allude to the nature of gambling while playing poker, Clover Pit is all about that rush you get while throwing that lever down and watching those lines spin, hoping you get that jackpot every single time, and it just fucking works. It's a serotonin engine on an almost unnerving scale. Every single time you hit even a mediocre set of scores, it is a rush of endorphins. And it's so good that there have been several runs where I've lost, and I don't even realize that I've lost until I'm unable to pay the debt back. I'm just so locked up in the groove of pulling the lever that I genuinely don't even realize that I'm not gonna win. There is a certain level of magic that this game exudes already in its short demo that I can't help but say that if you're gonna get any game on this list, you should get this one. Or Slay the Spire is a good game, isn't it? This game is the reason I'm making this video to begin with. Now, unlike Dice A Million, this isn't just Slay the Spire with a twist or anything. Mechanically, it's not even close. Structurally, however, it is very much the same game. You have a map that has multiple pathways that have random encounters, as well as events that can give you different results depending on what you choose, and each of those is broken up with at least one combat encounter. At the end of each arena, you'll fight a boss and progress to the next chapter. But what if Slay the Spire was a dexterity flicking tabletop arena game? Yeah! Honestly, I could genuinely just end this segment right here. It's Slay the Spire, but it's a fucking dexterity-flicking tabletop arena game. But I really gotta tell you what makes this game an incredible little bite-sized adventure. Flickshot is the perfect example of easy to learn, tricky to master. The entire goal of the game is to conquer combat encounters and progress your way up to the top of the volcano of the island that you and your rapscallion buddies have crashed onto. Each combat encounter will take place over 2 or 3 waves of enemies, and if you kill all the enemies on the board, then another wave will begin. The catch here is that there is at least usually one commander enemy, and if you manage to kill that enemy, then the wave immediately ends. Now each run consists of you picking 2 characters that each have their own distinct mechanism of combat. The Swashbuckler is the cleanest design as you just punch shit and deal damage for colliding with enemies. The Frogomancer has 4 frogs that you have to pick up every new arena, and every time you flick by an enemy, you mark that target, and then all of your frogs will attack marked targets. The Huntress marks the first thing that she comes in contact with and shoots a bullet through that target, hitting everything behind it, meaning that you have to think about end-turn positioning. Now, this on its own would be a smorgasbord of combination and variation, as finding fun combos between characters is a joy unto itself, but Flickshot adds another beautiful little dimension of variability in the trinket system. On top of your character's main ability, you get to choose from a set of trinkets that add an additional ability onto each character. There are ones that add bombs to your attacks. There's a trinket that adds fire to enemies, damaging them slowly over time. If you can believe your eyes, there's one that spawns 5 fireflies that increase damage dealt. There's one that makes all damage that everything takes to be split between a marked target. There are more that I haven't even unlocked yet, as well as a new character that I still haven't found. Now, what makes the moment-to-moment gameplay of Flickshot so fantastic is that it packs so much fun, tension, and strategy into every single decision that you make. Every single turn of yours is loaded with so much variance, whether it's the several angles that you can take your shot, trying to deduce where your little character will end up, or wondering whether the angle you'll bounce off an enemy or an obstacle will hit another enemy, or if this shot will hit the most amount of targets, or if that one will. It's all that deduction and thought process that I think that tabletop strategy combat games such as Warhammer can give you, but condensed and streamlined into a relatively simple dexterity combat game. The added bonus of being able to fine-tune your shots to pixel precision is so enticing and the sound effects so marvelously satisfying that with each flick of your little digital plastic caricatures, you can almost feel the tips of your fingernails starting to ache. At the time of this video's release, the game is out for real, and I have been playing the shit out of it. It is by far my favorite game on this list of indie roguelikes, and with its simple and satisfying gameplay loop, it is immediate, satisfying, and wonderfully addicting. Now, before I go, I want to talk very quickly about this extra little game about probability. In Unfair Flick, all you're trying to do is flip a coin to get 10 heads in a row. But unlike real life, the odds are stacked against you from the beginning, as your odds of getting even a single head are only 20%. While this game isn't technically a roguelike, it does have elements of them in the sense that you progress by unlocking new abilities, albeit those abilities are one of 4 that you get by earning money by landing on heads. You can increase your chain of heads multiplier, you can increase your odds of landing on heads, or you can increase the base value of your coin, increasing your income per head flipped. Despite being one of the most simple and basic games I've ever had the pleasure of playing, there is something oddly enticing and devilishly fascinating about Unfair Flips that proves to me that in the end, we are nothing but complicated little animals that like to see numbers go up and are obsessed with the idea that we can break the odds. But the thing is, the game even tells you that there is nothing behind the curtains about Unfair Flips. There are only raw chances. I think that the fact that you could potentially beat this game in under a minute, or potentially never see those 10 heads in a row, is so alluring that Unfair Flips is unironically one of the most compelling games I've played in a while. Is it traditionally fun? No, not really. But it is almost endlessly stimulating in the same way that a game like roulette is. You're not even really playing a game, you're watching a thing spin until it tells you a result. Each heads that you get in Unfair Flips is the start of that potential 10 in a row streak, and after a long period of duds, hearing that initial tone of that first heads is not only satisfying, it's addicting. Unfair Flips deserves to be experienced because there is literally nothing else like it. Roguelikes are an interesting genre. I used to hate them, believe it or not. Many years ago, I thought that they sacrificed level design and some game design simply for the sake of randomness, because that's what a roguelike was supposed to do. But Slay the Spire is a good game, isn't it? And playing that game kind of unlocked my understanding of what a roguelike is. Where AAA games are becoming more and more like big, epic movies, so focused on narrative and so focused on telling an engaging story, and there's a time and a place for that for sure. I think roguelikes are the prime example of what a lot of us got into video games for in the first place, which is pure, raw, unadulterated fun. And a good roguelike you can spend 4,500 hours in, or you can spend 5 in. And I think still, to at least some extent, get the same thing out of it. Packed with decision making, loaded with interesting mechanical designs, roguelikes are the modern example of what old school game design has really become. And if you ask me, when we're old and gray, roguelikes are probably going to be our bingo. Love your face, love your show. Thanks for watching.
Tomato is a fruit, but it's also a vegetable. Yeah!